Thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us. Our topic today has to do with strategic restaurant branding and a great view of that. And just to remind all of you, this is an ongoing series of webinars through Results Through Strategy. We also post all our former webinars up on our website at resultsthroughstrategy.com. So you can go back there and look at things that you might have missed in the past and find new things you might be interested in. So hopefully you'll be able to do that. You will be able to ask questions throughout the webinar. There's a chat button on the right-hand side and questions. So chats where you can make some comments, questions, you can ask questions, and then we will try and get to those along the way. And we'll also have some time at the end to be able to do that. So without further ado, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Fred LeFranc. I'm the founder of Results Through Strategy. And we've been in business now for 13 years, working with small and large brands, helping them in all aspects of the restaurant industry. And I'm really excited to introduce you to Rachel Phillips-Luther. And Rachel, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself as the founder and head of Impact Brands on our circle.
Hey, good morning, Fred. Well, first, thank you for the invite. There's nothing I love talking about more than branding, restaurant branding specifically. But yes, I work with Impact Brands. So Impact Brands was designed as a comprehensive kind of MarCom agency, and really we provide holistic services to a number of different folks in the industry, both B2B and B2C. And then our circle, what we discovered along the way is that there are a number of brands that are in need of strategic restaurant support, but don't have the G&A to invest in a Rachel or a CMO. And so as a result of that, also identified that there were some gaps, beyond branding. And so we've got a group of individuals that have all had C-suite or SVP experience that work on a fractional basis. So we work fractionally to support some of our clients as well.
Fantastic. Well, I'm happy to share that Rachel and I have just spent a fabulous weekend together with a group, not by ourselves, at the inaugural event with the Marketing Innovation Leadership Exchange put on by Revelry Brands. So we had dozens of CMOs up there, tons of snow, lots of great speakers, and it was just very exciting. So it's really given both of us some renewed energy as we get into this topic that we're going to be talking about today. You have anything to add on that, Rachel?
Well, it was an exceptional time. So it was the inaugural year for MILE, which is Marketing Innovation Leaders Exchange. And I think that the reality is that the topic of conversation was very consistent, across all of the different speakers. We had fantastic exchanges with folks like Xenial, who are working to redefine modern cloud-based technology for restaurants. Microsoft was there helping us understand the way that they're thinking about restaurants and technology more holistically. But for me, I think it was interesting just to talk about the real shift and transformation of the chief marketing officer's role in an organization. And as you know, Fred, I got to kick us off by talking about really the need for that individual to not only have exceptional business acumen, but to really be thinking about things beyond the traditional channels. And so I think we're going to get to talk a lot about that today, which is consistent with what we've been discussing the past couple of days.
That's right. So let's get right into it. So I think the big question right off the bat is, what is branding? I mean, so at the simplest level, Rachel, just help us understand your view of it as an experienced marketer.
Absolutely. When I think about a brand, and what I ask my clients to do all the time and internal organizations to think about is think about every individual that's ever become aware of your brand and your business. So this is anyone who's heard about you, who's experienced you, anyone who's worked with you. And if you were to close your eyes and think about exactly how they think about your brand and business, what their perceptions are, all of those perceptions collectively are your brand. And so as such, a brand really is not a thing. It's not tangible. It's intangible. And really our job as great brand marketers then is to help influence all of those perceptions against kind of a true north. And so as I think about the role of a brand marketer, it no longer is just about, providing great products and services and then, presenting those in a creative way. It really is about everything you do and how all of that ladders up into and develops a unique perception.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're saying a brand is like the soul of the organization, right? It's everywhere. It's omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, so it covers every aspect of what a company does with it internally and externally. That's great.
I think my favorite quote exactly is that, it's really about what people say about you when you're not in the room. And as such, it requires us to really think differently about the role that we play as a brand marketer in this business and really in any vertical any longer. If you'll push forward one for me, Fred. One of the things I've come to realize, and certainly when I get the opportunity to work with recent graduates, they come out of school with a really clear understanding of what it looks like to be a classically trained marketer. And oftentimes that really means that they're grounded in kind of the scientific principles of marketing. But when you look at successful brands, when you look at brands that are really developing enhanced emotional equity, they're brands that understand that there has to be a unique combination of science and art. And when you think about branding and in my opinion, great branding, it's when these two things are combined to ensure that the way in which you seek for people to perceive you is married to great sound marketing strategy.
Rachel, I love this graphic. I remember when you first shared it with me, because right in the middle of that, there's the word wonder. It's kind of small, so people sort of miss it. And I think great brand people, great marketers never lose their sense of curiosity and wonder, because we live in a world that's ever changing. And if we don't adjust to the changes in the dynamic of the world, our brands become irrelevant. And I think you really embody that sense of wonder and everything around you. You don't take anything for granted. You're always searching and seeking. So that's a wonderful way of putting that. That's why I love this graphic so much.
I appreciate that, Fred. And as we just discussed over the course of the last 4 days, brand really lives in absolutely everything that you do. So while it's intangible, it must be made tangible across the organization. And that's why I feel the CMO has really transitioned into, a key partner to the CEO and the CFO. So when you think about that powerhouse of the CEO and CFO, truly, I think the brands that are winning in this landscape are those that have really pulled the CMO in. And it's that collective of individuals that are really thinking about how brand translates across the organization at large. And I think this graphic that you've got does such a great job of providing a way or a map really to think about that in your organization.
Yeah, and I created this graphic to help my clients, restaurant CEOs or founders, really understand the difference between brand and marketing and what's intangible and tangible. And as you just said, Rachel, the brand is intangible. First off, we now know that it really exists in the hearts and minds of our guests, our partners, our vendors, our community. We can't control the conversation. We can only be part of that conversation. And so what the intangible part of a brand is the brand purpose. And now more than ever, employees and shoppers and consumers want to work and buy from brands that have a sense of purpose greater than just making a profit. The importance of that we'll get into later on. Then, of course, each brand should have a defined personality, the competitive positioning to make sure that you understand what you do better than your competitors, so you can be, differentiated in the marketplace. And then the brand promise that has to be fulfilled day in and day out, shift by shift, every bit of the guest experience. When you get down to the tangible elements, there are basically four. The initial one, of course, is marketing, right? Now, this is where marketing is the tangible evidence of the brand personality and its voice, right? Through messaging, advertising, social media, four-wall marketing, all the internal marketing that goes on, including to the employees. The financial model is a critical piece of a restaurant company, because if you don't make money, as Stephen Covey would always say, no margin, no mission, then you're not in business. So you can have a great idea of a brand and be warm and fuzzy, but you got to be able to make money to pay employees, to pay your vendors, and so forth and so on. The next one is what I call concept execution. It used to be called, in my mind, operations, but I've learned that operations with intention is really concept execution. If I know that there's a brand personality, and I have the same type of employees you have, counter staff or servers, hostesses, cooks, bussers, managers, my brand personality, by definition, needs to have people who are embodied in it through that brand purpose and are able to explain what it is. So if you think about two brands, let's say contemporary brands like Acaba Grill, that's really up and coming and bought Rachel's former company's Louis. Their brand personality is very well defined, and how people work within the brand is very clear. The same thing happens at Chick-fil-A. I think Chick-fil-A does a fabulous job of connecting their employees through engagement to their brand personality and voice. And so from that concept execution, we define the guest journey. What is that we want people to experience emotionally as they go through our restaurant experience, the employee journey to make sure the employees have engagement, and then just where's the price value, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And lastly, and not least importantly, it's culture. because you as the brand person are responsible for culture as much as you are for anything else. This is the internal communication around the values and the rewards that happen with an organization. If everything has balance, essentially you have positive outcomes, right? All this works. You have increased value, increased loyalty from your guests, higher traffic, sales, profits, and a positive outcome. All this goes into what you're trying to achieve. And so, as Rachel already said, brand is everything, right? But experience is everything at the restaurant level. What you're trying to do. Consumers are willing to spend more money for experiences that have meaning to them because they're so overwhelmed. All of us are overwhelmed by all the information that's coming our way, all the things that are happening in the world. I always joke with people, we're a tweet away from disaster. You don't know what's going to happen. And so this constant push on people really gets them on nerve, and the ability to have an experience that's meaningful and significant to them is really important. And so everything, therefore, is the brand. And that's really what you're trying to look at. So part of what we look at is your brand is the soul of your company, shows up everywhere. This is an example of a brand wheel in the things that you might take for granted, but must reflect your brand. And later on, Rachel's going to give us a great little case study of how she did that at her last job, where she was able to show them that the brand has to exist internally as well as externally because it is everywhere. The basic.
And Fred, just to add to that, I think one of the things that I encourage people to do, as you're thinking about, taking on a challenge, is to really reflect on and do a full audit. If you don't know how to do that, that's something that we do often, but do a complete brand audit and understand what perceptions are you creating across this whole wheel, because this wheel, to your point, is everything.
Great. No, I appreciate the comment. Thank you. So in terms of the brand, the responsibility that, the CMO has, I look at these 4 components here. There's a fixed version of the brand, right? What do we want our brand to become? And that brand vision, as I said, is the very top of the intangible thing, has to be very clear in everyone's mind because it helps you say no to things that hurt your brand. But so that never really changes, nor does your external brand promise, right? What is our commitment to our customers? What kind of experience are we trying to deliver? Who are we? Why do we exist? How does this manifest itself in our employees, in our decor, in our food? Now, what's interesting about that is while those things may remain fixed, like your Northern Star, what does change in this variable is the brand delivery. By what actions do we intend to fulfill our commitment? That's where it changes. A great example is what's happened with the rise of third-party delivery. I've never met a single restaurant operator who was ready for the rise of third-party delivery. They just didn't see it coming. But when it came, many adapted to it, and they had to figure out how they were going to do it that fulfilled their brand promise in ways that they would not disrupt the relationship they have with their guests. And then lastly, the positioning. How do we want to be perceived? What's our competitive advantage? And we take people through an exercise where they're able to look at what the price of entry is for their brand that they're in, their concept, and then what's their differentiation to make a difference as they move forward. So as it points out here in terms of differentiation, it's what happens when you authentically amplify the best of you. And authentic is a word you'll hear more from us on later on. That is counting more and more because when you have a defined purpose and you have an authentic personality, you're not being contrived and posing, it makes a difference. So not by finding ways to be a version of the competition, but by discovering how to be more of who you are, your unique individuality. And I say that is true of people as CMOs, the employees, as well as a brand itself. So we mentioned earlier when I was showing you my graphic, the value equation, the importance of price value. And this is the classic definition of price value. It is not value equals price. It is value equals food plus beverage quality plus service plus atmosphere over price. And that gives you a quality number. You can actually do this mathematically. When we work with clients, we'll take them through their top 3 competitors and we'll rank these appropriately. And the company has to do a self-assessment. The way we do that is, frankly, we look at social media feedback because people have a tendency to think they're better than they might really. So the guests don't lie. But Rachel, why don't you add the comment? We're going to add something that Kelly Valadi, who's now the president of TDN2K, shared with us in a speech he gave the other day. What's the new dimension here in the value equation?
Yeah, can you push forward there a slide for me? As we were thinking about this, and I think she did a beautiful job of helping the entire room come to grips with the real change that we've experienced, and no longer are those just the price of entry. So then she began to talk about this idea of what is the time, what is the exchange of time that consumer is going to give you for the experience that you're going to give them? how authentic do they believe you are? So, contrived experiences were at one point something that people sought out. And now really what we've seen is that with the dawn of modern technology and social, people are more, they desire more than ever real, authentic connections. And the restaurant vertical is one of the places where we can deliver on that every time. And then this idea of relevance, purpose, experience, community. I think when you think about each of these new variables in relation to your brand, it's important to really to define what it means for your organization. I talk about the idea of relevance being incredibly important, because oftentimes when I talk to a group of C-suite leaders, they talk about, gosh, you're telling me that the brand vision and the brand's promise shouldn't change. But if it's not changing, then how are we remaining relevant? And those two things are not identical. So we can continue to live our brand promise in a more relevant way. And that relevance might translate into the way in which you're marketing. So it could be your channels, it could be your actual content strategy, and your creative. And then you think about also the relevance in the way you're delivering the experience. So what do your team members look like? What is their apparel? We had the quick conversation, Fred, about, are you still asking them to wear goofy hats? Well, if they don't feel great about the way they're delivering the experience, then the consumer's going to pick up on that. And then there's the idea of purpose and the way that purpose translates into the execution and the experience, and community. Are you giving these team members and your guests an opportunity to be part of something bigger than themselves? And if you aren't, then why not? Because oftentimes what we discover is when answering that question, that perhaps there's something that we're concerned about or afraid of in the experience, and that's why we haven't chosen to engage. But this is really the more full value equation as we think about it today.
No, it's fantastic. And of course, all this means that the guest has a better experience, which leads to our wonderful term here of brand loyalty. So why don't you comment a little? So in terms of that brand loyalty, this is the intangible relationship. This is very much like any relationship you have in your personal life. You ask people, is your relationship with your significant other emotional or just practical? And, most of the time, at least 99% of the time, say so is emotional. And so a relationship that a guest has with your brand is also emotional, and we need to understand how that works. With that said, the manner in which we deliver the messaging to them has changed. This is something I got off the internet that shows the digital media infinity loop, where we can begin to see how we communicate with our guests nowadays, because there's an internal guest journey, but there's also an external guest journey through social media. And so the four elements here is the integrate, understand what's going on, the communication, the mediums, which Rachel will explain to us shortly, the analysis and discovery. And I'd say that CMOs have to both simultaneously see a very tight focus and a very broad scope, because you're looking at broad trends, what's going on across your menu, across your cohorts, while at the same time trying to develop a one-to-one relationship with your consumers. And with technology nowadays, we're able to do that. And once you do that, as you get to act and optimize, you're doing segmentation, you're doing cohort analysis, you're beginning to know how to communicate with someone on a very individual level to make sure that they really believe that they're connected to your brand, because you know who they are and you can give them what they want. And so, Rachel, it's so funny. I had a friend of mine who was in marketing who went off, had a couple of kids, came back and said, Fred, I can't go back to work because I'm no longer relevant. Everything I knew about marketing has changed with the exception of strategy. And that's happened for a lot of CMOs. Their job has changed more than any other person's job, maybe with the exception of the CEO in the last 15 years because of this rise of technology that's coming into place. So maybe you can share your thoughts in terms of how people can communicate now in this crazy new digital world we live in.
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking a lot about this thesis of experience is everything. And that experience is not simply about your four-wall experience. It's really about the experience that people have with your brand across every channel. And I'm sure some of you are looking at this graphic and thinking, yeah, that looks like, the home screen of my iPhone or my smartphone. And the reality is that there's an opportunity for consumers to be talking to you in real time 24/7. And if somebody walked into the front door of your establishment and stood there and didn't get greeted, you would go insane. And that's the exact same relationship they expect to have online. And big brands have really set the tone, but as a smaller brand, you have to consider that consumer expectations are changing just as fast as technology is advancing. And so as a result, when you look at this screen, These are all channels where people are looking to have a conversation or experience with your brand. And it can be a bit overwhelming, to your point, Fred. And I think, anyone that's thinking about the way in which they need to be influencing both dollars spent and then strategy internally as a CMO, you've got to be thinking about what are the most relevant channels, why are they relevant, and then what is my strategy to effectively deliver my brand experience across that channel. And so this really has reshaped the way I think a lot of modern marketers even think about their team structure and their org. Oftentimes we'll walk in and have a conversation with a marketing leader, and as we start to really discuss where the gaps are, they recognize that they haven't aligned their talent or they haven't aligned the team against the gap. And that can often present some challenges. And so, when you think about the way in which not only technology has changed the landscape, social media has as well. And I think if you push forward this idea of likes aren't enough. I say this a lot, and I have a lot of clients that will come to me and say, hey, what's the deal with our engagement? You're telling me that engagement is everything, but no one's really talking back to us online. And that's because a lot of people are looking at social as a publishing channel, as a place to just simply tell the consumer what you want them to hear and know. But you've got to really rethink the way that you think about social and think about it as an opportunity to learn more about customers' needs, to learn more about their expectations, and to build relationships with them online. And that's ultimately, when you think about, to your point, Fred, what it looks like to be loyal to someone, what it looks like to build relationships in your personal life. It's about what kind of value does that person offer to me? And that's exactly the same way that we think about the online relationship. And it's a concept called human media that I think Amanda Hite covered with you, a few webinars back. If you haven't caught that one, I would definitely recommend jumping back online and doing a review there. But this concept of human media is really, being online in order to better understand the entire world of your consumer, and then using that as an opportunity to really tell the consumer about why your brand is relevant to them.
No, that's fantastic. I think you said it so well here in terms of what's so really important for us.
So, it comes back to this same idea of experience is everything, and that's not simply inside the four walls. Experience is everything in your online relationships, in the way in which you're shaping the brand online. And then experience is everything, to your point earlier, Fred, about brand delivery, where, we're thinking about the shift in a third-party delivery service now being able to influence the way people think about your brand. If you have a brand that is in, a large part of catering is the mix, thinking about your catered experience and how to use that experience to, again, tell your brand story. The brand really does live everywhere, and that is beyond the four walls.
No, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think that the other piece that oftentimes we can forget is that there's no bigger heartbeat and no better place to impact your brand than the internal team. And so, when you really start to think about the value that a CMO has, and ultimately the way in which they've got to be thinking about their role in 2019 and beyond, it does start from the inside out. And if your team doesn't understand your purpose, if they don't feel viscerally connected to that, then it's very unlikely that the experience will ever translate effectively.
So, as you know, Rachel said very well, this elevating the emotional connection is really what it's all about. And I've asked Rachel to put together some slides here that'll help you have sort of a case study in terms of how you can put this into practice. You've heard experience everything matters, brand is everything, but now how do I do that? That's easy to hear, but not easy to do. And so you're going to get number one, first class view in terms of how Rachel did that with an iconic brand.
Yeah, so many of you may recognize this logo. My most recent corporate experience, I was the CMO of Jamba Juice. You can see here that it just says Jamba. This is a revised logo for a prototype that we built in Southern California. But I was incredibly excited about the idea of leading marketing initiatives for Jamba. As someone who had spent the better part of 5-6 years at Zoe's Kitchen, The idea that we can offer modern consumers, better for you options was something that was very important to me. I'm a mom of 4 boys. I use restaurants. Restaurants are our life. I'm married to a restaurant operator. And really the ability to rethink the Jamba brand promise. So the brand promise at Jamba was still very relevant. So Jamba's mission was to inspire and simplify healthy living. And in 2016, when I took this challenge on, there was certainly no more relevant brand promise. And in addition, they really had built the brand around this idea of fun. You look at this whirl of color, and it was all about blending fun into life and blend in the good. The internal team was very energetic and had just this very bold vision and purpose. And so I was incredibly excited. First couple of weeks on the job, I started to listen in on a variety of different things. And in one of those setups, I was listening into a campaign launch, internal campaign launch. So we had more than 100 franchisees on the line, and they were about to hear about the holiday campaign. And this is what I heard.
Elevator music.
It was elevator music. We had 100 franchisees on the line, and they were listening to elevator music. And I think, Fred, and everyone on the line, what dawned on me was that they really hadn't begun to think about what the brand looked like across every spoke on that wheel. And so here we were with some of the folks that were impacting our brand the most, our franchise partners. And we were starting a call in the most mundane, dreary way possible. And so while sometimes we think about the CMO's role as being highly strategic all the time, it's also the ability to recognize when something on that wheel isn't being executed in a way that is brand relevant. And so, very quickly, the next launch, as you can imagine, we made a significant change. And this was then how we started a conference call.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm hot air balloon like a ghost face. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
Are you all dancing, I hope? I use that example, Fred, and I think you and I have talked a lot about this. Great restaurant and brand marketing does not have to be expensive all the time. That slideshow cost us $0. It was really just about creating the awareness internally that every time we talk to our internal constituents, those shareholders, we had to, again, translate the brand promise to them in a relevant, high-energy way. I'll give you another example now about, what that really translates into in terms of tactics. So this is a good visual collage of a franchisee's Instagram page. And earlier I talked about, using social media in the ways in which it's intended. So if any of you have ever heard the term foodgasm or food porn, I think you probably all have. When you think about Instagram is a channel where people are really hungry for an image that either makes them hungry or encourages them to kind of take on a new adventure. And so we had a franchise partner who was using Instagram as a publishing platform, almost as an advertising vehicle. And so this is a really great example of right channel, wrong content. And so if you'll push forward a slide, Fred, I think what you'll see is a collage of the national page, which really did 3 or 4 things. One, it was content that was aligned around our pillars. So that was flavor, fit, and fun. So fitness and fun had to be, at the forefront of everything we were doing. In addition, you can see that we're not attempting to advertise to people through this channel, but instead we're working to engage them, to give them things that are appropriate for the channel, but then start conversations with them. And I think specifically when you think about what Instagram, as an example, should be doing, it's about interacting and engaging with consumers, with customers, and better understanding what they enjoy about your product or your experience, and then also giving them the opportunity to have that same enjoyment online. This is a quick example. I'm sure many of you contest online. Can you go back one for me still, Fred? But this was a smoothie name contest. So your summer smoothie name was your favorite fruit. What's your favorite fruit, Fred?
Mango.
And what's the name of your first pet?
Mittens.
So you are Mango Mittens forevermore to me. And you know, I think again, you know, the idea of bringing fun into the channel and creating engagement is really important. And you've got to think about what are those content pillars that are relevant for your brand, and then how to translate that into appropriate content for the channel. I also, if you'll push forward, happen to subscribe to the same belief you do, and I know Amanda does, and a number of the other folks that you work with frequently, which is every comment is an opportunity to connect. And a lot of the CEOs and CMOs I work with get overwhelmed by this comment. But again, if you think about your restaurant environment, if a table ever was talking to a host or a waiter and didn't receive a response back, you would be appalled. And you have to consider that's the same thing people expect, your customer expects online. And so when you think about Instagram, or you think about taking on a new social channel, don't take the channel on until you're fully prepared to deliver and engage in the way in which the consumer expects. It's almost better to not be present on a channel than it is to be present and ignoring your guests. And so, you know, think about every comment again as an opportunity to build that emotional equity with them. These are a couple of examples, I think, again, in line with what Amanda has talked about on a number of occasions, but this is how we were thinking about human media. So what is human media? Human media, in my opinion, is the opportunity to use comments, engagements, and your guests' social feeds as an opportunity to expose them to new ways to use your brand. Meaning, you can use human media to directly target consumers you feel like are highly relevant. So let's say, you know, you've got maybe your Snap Kitchen, and you know that one of your targets that is a high frequency user is a new mom. Well, you can actually go out onto any of these social platforms and find new moms and then begin conversations with them online. It is a hyper-focused, micro-targeted approach, but it's an approach that oftentimes yields exceptional rewards because it directly translates into traffic and trial, and it's free, essentially, outside of the manpower, the man hours. So these are a couple of examples of the ways in which at Jamba we use human media to our advantage. And this can often lead to, you know, again, that idea of heightened emotional equity, and then that person becomes an ambassador for the brand online, which, again, as we all know, is one of the best ways from a micro-influencer perspective to generate the right kind of relevant content in these online channels. So while I think a lot of people over the past 5 years have kind of used this little term, content is king, I would actually share my belief is that engagement is king in social channels. And it's not just social channels. Engagement is king, as we talked about earlier, with your internal team. So they are the heartbeat of your business. And if you're not engaging with them through appropriate channels, you know, we heard about the Yammer example when we were at Mile together this past week, Fred. And I think Yammer is a great way for you to connect with, you know, team members depending on the size of your brand. But if you're a smaller brand, you shouldn't even be worried about what the actual channel is. You should just be worried about reaching out and ensuring your team members know and can live your brand all the time. And then this is a storefront of Jamba. And, you know, as you may be thinking, okay, I've seen a Jamba that looks just like that in my area. But one of the things that was really important, again, in thinking about translating this brand and making it relevant future state was ensuring that everything about the experience translated into inspiring, healthy living and fun. And so here's a mock-up of the new Jambas, which you can find in Southern California, with the juice drops, with a ton of fun and color pumped into this exterior elevation. And really, again, the desire to create that experience from the minute that you see a Jamba Juice location.
Rachel, that was fantastic. I mean, you really helped us understand how you take this idea that brand is everything, engagement is everything in a practical way, because it really is. And we can spend hours going all this kind of stuff. So I think that the high end for us is to recognize the brand is the soul of your concept. And you as CMOs, those of you who have that accountability on this webinar, are the keepers of that flame. And it is your job to do that and to partner with the CEO and the other senior leaders in the organization to make sure there's a brand filter done with everything you try and do. As I mentioned, one infographic I shared, concept execution, operations with intention is where the magic happens. And it has to have employees that are engaged, because they carry the brand in their hearts and minds, and that's how it transmits it over to your guests. Emotional engagement, as Ray just shared with us, is everything. And the idea is to really up the ante when it comes to understanding what emotional engagement means. It's not just making people feel good, it's making them to feel their whole sense of humanity. Food that's delicious, food that creates anticipation, joy, happiness. Those are the kind of things we're trying to do. And then through that, marketing is who you are is what we're trying to achieve. Rachel, do you have any closing statements for our audience here?
No, I don't have any closing statements other than thank you so much for inviting me to speak about this with you, Fred. As you know, I believe in exceptional brand strategy, and culture being a part of that is at the heart of outstanding results, and I know you do as well. So I've enjoyed getting to share a little bit more about my thoughts on that with you.
Well, Rachel, we have a couple of questions, so let me just get those to you. One is, which 2 or 3 social media channels seem to be the most effective? You just talked a lot about Instagram, obviously, but why don't you give us the answer to that question?
Yeah, so first I would start with, in order to answer that question, I first would want to know what your business goals are. And, depending on where the organization is today and who the target demographic is, that's really the questions that we need to, or those are the answers we need before we could, give you great thoughts on which channels to focus on. That being said, Instagram for food brands is one of the places that you almost have to play, kind of price of entry. If you've got a consumer who's, 40 plus, we're really seeing that Facebook is the channel that's having great traction. Facebook's interesting because the algorithm no longer allows you to really have kind of any success with organic content, but you can use Facebook in hyper targeting, and you can also use Facebook to develop and have great conversations online with your guests.
Yeah, Facebook
is
good at acquisition too, because you can really get into a new market. I work with some CMOs that use Facebook as they get concepts into new markets to begin to attract an audience to know who they are.
Absolutely. Building an addressable audience through Facebook acquisition is definitely a must in new market entry. I agree. And then if you've got a younger consumer, or if it happens to skew male, Twitter is still highly relevant. Snapchat is one I get questions about often. The deal with Snapchat is it does really apply to millennials and zennials. And Snapchat is one where you have to have someone focused on it in a bit more often. It requires more energy than some of the other channels to manage. And it's also a channel that you really want to have kind of a differentiated play. And so Snapchat, unless you've got predominantly a younger consumer, I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about yet today. But again, can be a successful part of the social mix. So really, I guess to finish there, I would say, understand your business goals, make sure you have a really clear idea of who your target is, and then we can look at what channels align with my business goals and target.
No, that's good. And one of the other questions we have is, how do we show ROI to our CEO and CFO for social media? And I'm going to grab that one myself. We've talked about this at our conference, and my retort to them was to ask the CFO, what's the ROI in literacy? Because that's essentially what we're talking about. You cannot necessarily always translate it to dollars and cents. There are mediums and ways of measuring social sentiment to see whether people like you or not, whether your score is going up or not. But essentially, what's the ROI in your relationship at home with your husband or your wife or your children, right? It's ROI is an important financial measure, but return on relationship is harder to measure than just return on investment, and equally as important. And I think hopefully you've captured that through Rachel's great examples today, in terms of, and you can hear her enthusiasm through the screen here in terms of what the work that she does and how she approaches it. But to wrap things up, you will all be receiving copies of this in the next few days through the email link. It'll be posted on our website. Rachel mentioned a couple of other seminars that we have done in the past that might give you some more understanding of this, and we look forward to your feedback in the future. And thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us and allow us to share the joy that we have, that brand is everything.